Hello everybody, welcome to Homemaking Radio. I hope you get a few things done while you listen today, and I hope you're doing well or as best you can in your present circumstances and that you have great plans for its improvement. I'm Mrs. Sherman. I'm broadcasting for one of the smaller rooms in the manse, and I'm so honored that you would come here, and I hope that you don't just stay and watch because there isn't anything much to look at. I am broadcasting from the sewing room, and I have recently hung some curtains in it which I got at Grocery Outlet, which I'm quite happy with. And I also am loving these dark winter days and nights, and the darkness of course lasts longer than the daylight, so I am not waiting for daylight just to get things done. And often I go ahead and have my Jane Austen walk and do my exercises, go outside and breathe the air and do a little stealth sipping, and I'll include some of that in the pictures. If you're new here, please click the link in the description box and go over to the blog where I have posted this and embedded this video because I'm making them for my blog, and you'll get to see the rest, maybe some extra pictures, and maybe a summarization of what I have spoken about today. I have started out these videos nearly every time with preparation, and I'll do that today, and that is before we get started in this wonderful and sometimes confusing life of homemaking, and challenging, of course. I often say get dressed up, do your very best, try to look your best. I'm wearing one of my sparkly sweaters because this is a festive time of year here, and I don't get to wear it very much. If I do any homemaking in it, I'll probably put an apron on, or if I decide to change into one of my plaid shirts for work, I'll do that. But I wanted to dress up for you today. And I know that I had a friend once, and I know she would always say when someone said, "Why are you all dressed up?" If we went to the grocery store together, someone would always ask her, and she'd say, "Why, for you. I'm getting dressed up for the people around me." So that's one reason to dress for the day. The other part of preparation was the idea of stretches, exercise, and I've recently found out you can look up just about anything that bothers you, such as a headache or joint aches, or your posture, improving your posture, or digestion or belly fat or anything. You can find a stretch or a pose or an exercise for that. And I don't know how I found this, but something came up on YouTube called Shaped by Faith. And I had spoken to you in the past about how we need more women who are of the faith, who will quote the words of Christ and the words of the apostles to us from Scripture during exercise, or to associate it with your spiritual growth. And this was called Shaped by Faith, Shaping Our Bodies and Hearts for God's Purposes. Isn't that nice? I haven't actually followed any of it yet or looked at it, but I know she sometimes uses one of those great big rubber balls, and I have one, and it's just sitting there in the closet. Somebody recommended it for one of us when we had had an injury or something, and I can't remember why we have it. Somebody in the family had it, and I thought, well, maybe I'll get that out and try it. I like to switch my exercises around. If you do the same thing all the time, apparently you won't see any changes in your strength or your health or your weight. But if you switch them around, so I like to try different things. And although I started out with Fabulous 50s and enjoyed that a lot, I'm going more now towards just the articles that show the drawings of people. I need to print those off just in case I lose my internet, so that I can follow it without having a video. And we all need to be prepared for things like that. Now, one of the things that getting ready involves is making your list. And so I'll write down my list, even if it's the same thing that I did yesterday. Even if I didn't get it all done, I'll write it down because it makes my mind active, and putting something on paper is very valuable to write your thoughts down. So I'll have all the things that I need to do to get ready. I always like to start in the kitchen. I like that nice and clean. I try to get it clean before I go to bed, but I go to bed incredibly early at Jane Austen time. And then other people, have been there, and I like to have it a little bit more polished. So I'll head for that first thing in the morning and get everything set up for the day, and then go around to see other small details of things that need to be done and make my list. And so one of the things that I have been doing with my descendants that's so almost dreamy is I've started storylines with them. Now this is where the way it began was when they were all here for Thanksgiving. I was telling them about a place that I order sometimes by phone, and I think it was Victorian Trading Company, and all of the people who answer the phone answer as a Jane Austen character. And a man will say, "Good afternoon, this is Mr. Darcy, how can I help you?" And a woman will say, "Good afternoon, this is Jane Elliot, may I help you?" And so whatever portal they're sitting at, they're given a name to use. And I suppose with today's names, it's easier to recognize. It's easier to remember who served you. And all of the people are Jane Austen characters, and that's how they answer the phone. And then they get some privacy for themselves too. And so I was talking to my descendants about it, and they were telling me about how we could do this with businesses all over. And we had a really enjoyable afternoon making up names for people in businesses, like, this is the hardware store, Mr. Steele speaking, or Mr. Wood speaking, and we made up names to take the calls and the orders from every business we could think of, and just had an enormous, glorious time doing that. And from there, we developed what I call storylines. And as you know, I'm a veteran homeschooler, and I just like to keep the thing going all the time. It's hard to quit once you've enjoyed it so much, enjoyed your children so much, and now it's going on to the grandchildren, but the children still come around. And one of the things that we began was storylines. Now this means, as you all know, I listen to audiobooks sometimes, but I like to make up storylines because it's nice to listen to things, it's nice to watch things, but that's all kind of passive. What's active is writing or thinking, and I love some of the stories because in the old days when we listened to stories or we read them, our minds imagined much of the details. Whereas sometimes we'd get a hold of a book that had every detail written down, and we didn't enjoy that as much, but our minds filled in with details, and we imagined the circumstances and the characters the way we wanted to. In fact, the man who produced the 1990s Anne of Green Gables said it was difficult for him because everyone for generations had read the Anne of Green Gables series and had decided in their own minds what Anne looked like and what she was like. And that's the way it should be. But he did such a good job making her character appealing to everyone. Anyway, and so storylines. I started one with my airplane pilot grandson, descendant, who wants to have his own plane, and he has his own business. I wish I had the card with me. Yes, I think I do. Maybe I can find that here. Here it is. And he says he graduated this year from homeschool, and so he has started. Wants to. There's his card, and he wants to fly an airplane. And I'm going to be, he's going to be a teacher, I'm going to be one of his students, and I'll probably have terrible dreams. And so he has started a business to sell airplane parts to fund his flight training. He built his own business website. Check it out. It's onlineaviationparts.com. Do you know anybody who needs parts? I don't know. The descendants always want me to promote something they're doing, but my audience is homemakers, and I'm not sure anyone would be interested in this. I'll just go ahead and put that on there, though. And so because I've already got one of them, my granddaughter whose birthday is December 25th, and her new website is on sewing, and she has updated it because every Monday it's updated. Please go and look at that. I think I have it on my sidebar somewhere. And so storylines. So because he is interested in flight, and he wants his own plane. And by the way, I wanted you to enjoy my little heater back here. It's not really heating. I like to plug it in just for the light. And I've got these kinds of heaters in every room, but I don't actually use the heat because it's electric. And on these old houses, the old electric wiring, sometimes it'll just shut everything down. So I just use the light, and the light consists of, I undid it in the back one time to replace it, and it's just a little, one of those little tiny nightlight bulbs that you buy at the Dollar Tree. And so I enjoy it because it's winter here, and it just gives a little bit of, I don't know, just warm feeling. And so since he is going to be an airline flight, we text back and forth, and I decided that I wanted to start a storyline with him. And a storyline means we don't actually tell the whole story in detail. We don't write it. We don't write a book. We just tell a story so that we get the outline, and then we imagine it all day long, or we add more things to it, and we text back and forth, and he'll say it's your turn, and I'll say it's your turn, and then what the character did. So it starts out with the young man flying his little private plane around in an area in eastern Oregon where it's more deserty, and they call it the high desert here. And he has seen more than one time a little cabin in a clearing, and noticed it was interesting, but one day decides he's going to find a place to land and check it out. And so he does, and then the story continues back and forth between the two of us, that he goes into the house. And of course I know about this because growing up in Alaska, when you walked through the woods and found a cabin, there was no lock on the door. But if you went in and if you stayed there or used anything, you'd leave a note and thank them. And so he went into the cabin, and a cat came out from, I don't know if it was outside of the cabin, I can't remember, or inside of the cabin. The cat came out, and the cat would not let him go. He clung to him like a stuck flea, and so he tried to get the cat to leave him alone, and he wanted to go back to the plane, but the cat got in the plane and wouldn't get out of the plane. So then the story goes back and forth, and so finally he straps the cat in with a seatbelt and takes the cat back to his home. But after a few days, his conscience begins to bother him, and he wants to take the cat back. And so we're at the point now where the cat won't get in the plane. But he did leave a note for the owner of the cabin that the cat had come with him, and showed him, address, everything, where to go. And then I have another story going on with someone else about a man who has he's growing in years, and starting to think he's going to have to give up his farmhouse and his farm, but he can't sell it because everything's in such bad shape, and there's so much old equipment on the property, and broken down fences, and so many repairs that need to be done. So his grandson, he hires him to come and says that he can have, and of course the story is going back and forth. He can't sell it, of course. He hasn't had any luck selling it. So he hires his grandson and says, you can have the property if you will clean it up, and if you will live here while you clean it up. If you will get it back in shape, and if you will live here while you clean it up. And so it has transpired to the point where he's, where is he going to sleep while he's there when he first gets first begins, and what is his first job going to be, and what is he going to find in this old place, and all the things that transpire. And while cleaning up a little area, he finds a loose tile, opens it up, and there's a box in there. And so back and forth, we've got this story going. And then one of my descendants has an interesting storyline. These are just storylines, and we just text back and forth these storylines. They don't go anywhere. We don't intend to turn them into books or written stories, because it just puts labor into it, and then the fun is gone. So, and she has a storyline about a young man and a young woman who are sick of people trying to match them up to other people, and they just want everyone to leave them alone, and how eventually they do end up meeting more than once in each other's parents' homes, and how that happens, and both of these people don't know each other and are tired of being matched up. It's very interesting, and they have a common bond because they're tired of being matched up. But and we were texting back and forth these things, and so I thought you would enjoy my new adventure. It goes along with stealth sipping, doesn't it? It's just stealth storytelling. So silent storytelling, you're just doing it on the text, and of course, if we didn't have that, we would just write letters to each other, and we would continue stories. And so I think it's really important, if you try to find something creative to do, that you don't look around and find out what everybody else is doing, because it'd be discouraging. If you have an interest and you want to do something that's creative, sometimes you look and see how many people are doing it. You think, oh, no, I don't want to. Everybody else is doing it. But no matter what, if you do the same thing, you're still doing it differently, because you're a different person. You're coming from a different perspective. You have a different mind, and different experiences and different interests, so you can make it your own. And no matter how many people have written a book on such and such, or written a story, or done a blog on such and such, yours will be uniquely yours, and it won't be the same. So don't be discouraged about that. Now, I think with homemaking, as we go from, getting yourself ready, having your cup of tea, making your list, I think it's very important to turn homemaking into creative art or an artistry. Because if you don't, it can be just mechanical or materialistic and lack the spirit of it. And I think it's really important. Of course, we all know that it's work, but that work can be turned into a type of creative art. And that's the spirit of it. That's the attitude we have to have. I know not everybody's going to feel the same, and you might not agree with all of this, but we can still be friends. And I wish I had brought a book in here that I bought years ago. It's one of the Barber books, Babour, I think, and they have those decal edge pages, and that nice paper that's like, I'm trying to think, it's more like papyrus. It's got tooth in it, and I'm trying to think of what it's called. It's more like parchment, and it had a picture on it, and it was called The Farmer's Daughter. And I got it because the picture on the front showed this wonderful piece of land that looks like something around here, and so I used that for a little area that I have that looks kind of pioneerish, farmy, and so just little creative things that I do around here that you can do yourself too. I recently learned about purifying the home of viruses and trying to keep from getting sick or getting a cough, or if you are coughing, and I will try to include the link to that. And it was done by someone in Japan, I think, but he peeled a little orange, just one of those little ones, and put the orange peel and the orange in water with whole cloves and ginger and a slice of lemon, and heated it on low. And I did that the other day, and I got more delightful compliments on how good it made people feel. It apparently will help to purify your home. And also I have juniper growing outside. I have done that before. I've had to boil it on top of the stove, just put it on low, and it really does make a difference, and also for how you feel in the home. Now, I also wanted to go on to talk about other things, but which I'll come back to in just a minute. One of my sons came to see me on Christmas Day. I know I was not going to see anybody, remember that? So I wanted to show you what we did. And the first thing I did, I said, you bring something to show me and I'll have something to show you. And so he had some things to talk to me. He's going to teach me how a certain type of physical fitness that he's learning, and he's going to teach that to me. And so I read a little paragraph out of Eric Sloane's weather book, which I've read to you. So I said, I'll just read, and then you stop me when you want, if something piques your mind or your imagination or your interest, just stop me. So I was reading along here, and I came across this paragraph, and he stopped me to talk about it. And it said here, moods can be changed by atmospheric changes, and it's wise to take this into consideration. Many people can feel drunk with humidity or heat. Many people have even become extremely irritable in dry warmth. Isn't that interesting? And then there was another one here. See if I can find it, that he thought was interesting, and we stopped and talked about it for a while. It says here, they're talking about the thermometer and low pressure, and it said, there are obvious mental depressions which people have in pre-storm atmosphere. A drop in air pressure affects the nerves instantly by causing greater dehydration of the tissues. Old wounds begin to ache. Corns and bunions are felt the minute the barometer drops. So he stopped to talk to me about that because he had had an injury many years ago while in the military, and had a difficult time because it'll flare up every now and then. And we talked about this, and he said that one thing he brought out about this is that in many ways we are sheltered from our own atmosphere, from our own weather, because we go from one institution to another. Children are kept in school for many hours and many years of their lives and never really learn to the signs that they feel, what they smell. And this talked about many of the things that were side effects of weather that people don't know about. He was very interested in that and talked to me at great length on how the allopathic system wants to just, when you don't feel good or you're feeling a little off, wants to just give you a tablet or a pill. And so we talked about that at length. And then I read him something else because he was interested in, he had read me a couple of things, but he has a side job of his own, or he's like an entrepreneur, and he helps to match people up for interviews, for jobs, and has seen some major problems with the interviews, and how some people can't get past an interview, how the interviews are shut down, or how quickly interviews can judge you. And I was reading him something from Brian Kozlowski's Jane Austen Diet, and I told him I had adopted him, so he had a new brother, and they're both the same age. And so I was reading this to him, and I want you to know what he said after he heard this. And he told me a lot of things too, and I did take some notes. This is on the chapter called Mutual Civility. And it's about Jane Austen's Body Basics and their whole attitude towards their health and the body. And so I didn't read the whole chapter to him, but this paragraph was enough. With him and me and with all my descendants, they fill in everything. You don't have to tell them every little detail. They'll comment on it. So this was called Universal Truth Number 5, Mutual Civility. Truly embracing Austen's universal truths for yourself might take some time. Unlearning some of the worst dieting flaws and foibles I picked up from modern life took me some time too. Though, as far as Jane is concerned, we're in better company than we realize. Every character in Austen world arrives in their stories with their own little flaws and foibles to work through as well. But notice that it's only Jane's heroes and heroines who make an effort to improve themselves along the way. To borrow Lizzie's endearing language, your body naturally improves upon acquaintance. And I probably should change my introduction to that. Is that welcome to Homemaking Radio. Might be new and unusual for some of you, but I hope that I improve upon acquaintance. The more you know how it works and what it needs to have to thrive, the better this cooperative relationship of health becomes. As it was with Darcy, from knowing him better, his disposition was better understood. And so then he goes on to say you don't have to love your body right from the start. But it improves upon acquaintance. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about this is because he stopped right there and he said, there's the problem with interviews. He said, they want you to be all happy and nice and you understand them. They understand you right away from just a quick interview or the first impressions. And nobody gets to improve upon acquaintance. So I pointed to him and I said, well, then you, my son, you are going to invent reverse interviews, or you're going to invent a way to totally do away with interviews. You're going to figure out how to help people get jobs without interviews. And of course, it all boils down to the choice of jobs, and he mentioned the phrase, find a need and fill it, and the world will beat a path to your door. And my goal for my children after homeschooling was they would never have to write a resume. They would never have to go for an interview, and none of them ever did. They were hired on the spot by somebody that was at dinner over here, or we met them somewhere, and wanted to know and had heard some of the things that they do. Well, some of them had speaking abilities, so the radio wanted to know more about them. Could they come and work? And at that time, in that era, the late 1980s, early 1990s, people that had businesses were just wanting someone that would come in and help or work or do something and be there on time. That's all it required. Just be there on time and be willing to learn how it is done. And they were very happy to get any of my children to come because they knew that they weren't going to insist on doing things the way they were taught in a college or a training school, but the way the business wanted it done. And so they never, ever had to fill out a resume. They never had to knock on a door. They never had to make an application. And all of them got jobs. And one of them was very keen on construction, was already building things, and somebody begged him to come work for him. And so that would be the ideal way, although I know a lot of people who grow up in the system are going to have to use the interview system. But he stopped me and he said, become better upon acquaintance. He thought that was phenomenal. He says that is the problem. He says, let me just read it to you again. It said, improves upon acquaintance. He says they're not giving anybody a chance to improve upon acquaintance. And, of course, we know that it's not really smart to get all excited about someone until you really know them. because while they might have a surface appeal, surface friendliness, they might not be that way underneath. I also read to him, it wasn't all one way, but I've only got a record of what I've done in these books here, and also some of the things that he was talking to me about were just pretty fantastic. I don't have my notes here right now, but I read to him this paragraph, or this entry from Stepping Heavenward by Elizabeth Prentice, written in 1831, the diary of a young girl as she grows closer to doing what God wants her to do. And I read to him what I read to you last time about her visit to the minister's wife, and how she had read some wonderful stories about missionaries and heroes, and she said, I wish I could go do something heroic like that. But the minister's wife, and I'll just read this to you again because I read this to him, and he also helps young people learn how to get jobs. And he said this was very helpful because it showed the truth of the scripture, he who's faithful in little will be faithful in much. So I'll just read it to you again. It was about how this young girl wanted, Kate was her name, and Katie, and she wanted so bad to do something great. And she said, and so the minister's wife said to her, you do have some home duties, do you not? And see, this little story has a principle in it that could be applied in other ways too, not just for inside their home, but in other things too. People especially who've got these grand ideas of something they want to do that's great. No one wants to do these small things, but I'm telling you, the greatest thing that you can do is in your home. You do have some home duties, I suppose. Yes, I have the care of my own room, and my mother wants me to have general oversight of the parlor. You know, we have but one parlor now. Is that all you have to do? Oh, my music and drawing take up a good deal of my time, and I read and study more or less, and go out some, and we have a good many visitors. I suppose, then, you keep your room in nice order, and that the parlor is dusted every morning, loose music put out of the way. She's talking about the sheet music. Books restored in their places. Oh, I know that Mother has been talking to you. Your mother has told me nothing at all. Well, then, I said, laughing but a little ashamed, I don't keep my room in nice order. And Mother really sees to the parlor herself, although I pretend to do it. And she is never annoyed by this neglect? Oh, yes, very much annoyed. Then, dear Katie, suppose your first act of heroism tomorrow should be the gratifying your mother in these little things, little though they are. Surely your first duty next to pleasing God is to please your mother, and in every possible way to sweeten and beautify her life. You may depend upon it that it is the life of real heroism and self-sacrifice that must begin and lay its foundation in this little world, wherein it learns its first lesson and takes its first steps. And do you really think that God notices such little things? My dear child, what a question! If there is any one truth I would gladly impress on your mind, is that God notices the most trivial acts, accepts the poorest, most threadbare little service, listens to the coldest, feeblest petition, and gathers up with parental fondness all our fragmentary desires and attempts at good works. Oh, if we could only begin to conceive how he loves us, what a different creatures we would be. I felt inspired by her enthusiasm, though I don't think I quite understood exactly what she means. I did not dare stay any longer, for with the great host of children she must have had her hands full. And it goes on to say that her mother was much astonished because she began to clean up her act at home. And she says, I was flying about this morning singing and dusting the furniture when she came in. And she said, he who is faithful in that which is least will be faithful in that which is much. And yes, this is such a true thing. And of course, my son was commenting on this, and what a powerful story that is to prove, to illustrate that scripture. And he wants to work to help Christian young men and women in interviews and jobs. But first, we're going to change this old interview. It's time for it to go. We'll find some other way. Now, I have a couple of things to show you, even though I like to let you go and do your work. And I'll see how much time I have left here. I got some of these that have batteries in them, and they're wax on the outside, and you can turn them on and off by twisting the bottom here. And they also are timed somehow. I don't know how, but they come on at night and turn off in the morning. And but most of the candle holders that I had, it would be wobbly, and the candelabras I had, they'd be wobbly in there. And of course, you can put foil in there, you can put other things in there to make them, and you can get these little bands, rubber bands and things to make them, but I wasn't having any success no matter what. So at the dollar store, I found these balls of string, and I remembered that we used to be able to get these balls of string, and there was a little pair of scissors sticking out of the area here, this hole here, so the scissors and the string would be together. And I got to looking at that, and last autumn I bought some of these and gave them to the ladies in my ladies class, and I had covered them in a shiny autumn fabric and put a leaf in them and made little pumpkins for them, but it was very useful. And I stuck this in here, and that sat very well on the table, and I'll put that there, and much better than a candle holder. And it also is very rustic looking. It's a nice little accent. The other thing I wanted to show you is I was going through old cards and things, and I found this, and these also come from the dollar store, and it's there is invitations, 6 invitations. Now, I remembered when I got them out, trying to, give things away that I don't need anymore. And it says, join us for a special occasion, and it's for date, time, place, hosted by, and the number and the address and how you can answer. And I remembered years ago, I had some of these and wasn't going to use them, so I gave them to the children. And we also had a rubber stamp that you could stamp one of these invitations on. And they were absolutely fascinated with it and filled these out and passed them around to each other for invitations. And they would pick them up from where they were given. They had little envelopes on their doors, and they were places where people would give each other things, letters and things. And they got these invitations out, and they would read them and just laugh and have such a good time. And they'd make up things make up events. So if you've got anything like this and you're indoors with your children and they can read and write, or even if they can't, they can still have a very enjoyable time with these invitations. And when they're old enough to understand invitations, they feel very very accomplished, because an invitation is something quite formal still. And anymore, I wonder how long it's going to be before we won't have invitations anymore. Formal type invites like this. But since I'm not using them, that's what I would do. I would let the children have them. Tell them how to fill it in, and the little ones can come and tell you what they want on them, and you can really enjoy this. And when my parents were on the homestead with all of us in the winter, and we could not go anywhere, they got out anything that they had, even old checkbooks that they weren't going to use anymore, and let us play with checks and let us learn to write checks to each other. And of course, they just stayed on the homestead there. And so those are just some little tips for home life. And I also wanted to tell you that the last video of the last season, or I don't know what you would call it, part of Wives and Daughters, in fact, all 6 parts of Wives and Daughters, you can watch it for free online at a place called dailymotion.com. And I watched the last episode recently because I was curious about a saying that was going through my mind that Dr. Gibson, there was a little exchange between Dr. Gibson and Roger, who loved Molly, his daughter, and Roger was asking him if he could see Molly, and he said, "Do you think Molly will forgive me for behaving so badly?" He said, "I wouldn't blame her, and I wouldn't blame you if you gave up on me or something." And he said, "Well, women are strange. They're just as easy to forgive a man who's thrown his life away on something else as not. But if she can stomach you, so can I." And he patted him on the shoulder. And so Roger said, I see you mean to encourage me." And I wondered what that was all about, so I listened a little bit more carefully. And Roger was like a nature scientist, and so as Mr. Gibson rode away on his horse, he said, "Give me a man of science and love, no one to beat him for folly." And so what he was saying was, you may be book smart, you may be a smart scientist, but you're not very smart about people. And so if you want to go and watch Wives and Daughters for free, it's on dailymotion.com if you can find it. There should be 6 episodes. And if you're not real sure about whether you would like it or not, just go ahead and watch the last one. I'm just going to look over my notes and make sure that I have covered everything that I was going to talk to you about today. Now, one of the things that we have started doing here too is write little magazines for each other. But these magazines are not going to be great big magazines. What we're going to do here, and it's just for, some of my descendants. This is what's called a long envelope, or a business envelope. And I particularly like the ones that have the peel-off strip. And so what I'll do to make a magazine for her, now you can check online for your post office on how much weight, a lot of us have little scales here and there, kitchen scales and stuff, how much weight a regular stamp will take. And it's usually about 4 sheets of thin paper. This is a little bit heavier, so I might use 2. So what I'll do is I'll take this envelope and I'll trace it onto this paper, and I'll make pages. I'll make pages the same size as the paper, and then I'll tape them or glue them together, and I'll make a magazine that's the same size as the envelope, and that way it's just a stamp, and I don't have to go to the post office because I can put it out in my box. And so that's one thing I'm striving for more and more, is not having to go to the post office and stand in line, not mailing packages, not mailing anything bigger than what I can put a stamp on here at the house. I'm trying to reduce my standing in lines and running around and going places. In the old days, they'd have butlers and people that used to do that for you. If I could persuade one of my descendants to come and live here and get on a small salary, free rent, and then do all this stuff for me, wouldn't that be nice? But anyway, that's what it would look like, and it would be several pages. And I would say things like there'd be for the girls, they would have a page of fashion drawing or sewing ideas. And I would say something like, I don't have time to sew a dress for you, but here's an idea for a design that I had, and that's just as exciting, because then maybe they can do it. So I wanted to share that with you, so that, or if you have a card size that you prefer, and a card size envelope, and you prefer to cut your paper that size, you could do that too, and make your magazines the same size as your envelopes. And these magazines are so much fun because we illustrate them in color, we write stories in them, we do everything that the old-fashioned magazines used to have. If you remember, in the old days there was a story, and usually you could submit a story and some editor would publish it for you, but it's better just to do your own. And then might be a puzzle in there might be a joke, there might be a drawing, And for younger people, there might be a dot to dot, and all the things you can do in a little magazine for your descendants, and even your grown children that are in their 40s and 50s still like it. And all the things that I read about in the weather book, or some of these other books that I have shared with you, I'd put that all in a little magazine. And also a letter, I write a letter in the magazine. And then here's another thing that we had thought about doing, was making a blank book, sending it back and forth to each other to fill in. So she would write a letter on one side, and then I would answer it on the other side. Then we send it back, and then we just keep filling up these pages so we can keep the letters together. So we thought about writing Jane Austen style letters and then putting them in a book years later, but then you'd have to go back and forth and collect everybody's letters, or you'd have to photograph them and send them. And so the idea of sending a little blank book, just made out of several sheets of paper, one stamp, back and forth, and writing, that just sounds kind of creative and fun to me, something that I would stay up late at night thinking about. Now, ladies, I haven't been here as long today because I wasn't as prepared as I should be, and I don't have anything else to read to you, but I did bring along Linda S. Lichter's book on simple social graces, and this is one of the ones I'm going to read to my son because he was interested in how life was before industry and electricity and petroleum controlled so many things. And I was telling him about this book because she was actually asked by a newspaper that she worked for to go and do some research for a newspaper article on how women of the Victorian era were so oppressed and compared to women of the modern era. And I believe it was 1980s that this was published. And no, it was 1998, nearly 2000 when this was published. And to her astonishment, she discovered so much more, that it was actually the opposite, that women were quite well off, quite well respected. Families were held in high distinction. Even the lowliest family was very important, and it wasn't something that you messed up. I used to wonder, back in the 1980s, when people started coming into families or coming home, I'd observe sometimes one of the children would get it in their heads that they were not happy, or that they just weren't being treated with very much favor, and so they wanted to vent and be unhappy, and they would disturb everybody in the family with their big complaints and their blow-ups and everything. And I got an idea of what to say. Of course, you never know when it's happening. A lot of people say you just don't know when it's happening what to say, but years later I pondered on this, and I wondered if everyone would say, if you'd learn to say, okay, so what are we doing right now that is harmful to you? What am I doing right now this very day? What have I done this past day, or this past few days, or this past week that was harmful to you? And they can't answer. They just stare at you. And or the other thing to say is, I'm really, really sorry because I wasn't aware of this. I'm just so sorry. Is there something that I could do right now to alleviate it? And make the person that's complaining think about how they're affecting the whole family. And I told you about this McGuffey Reader story that I had read. And as the McGuffey Readers volumes were republished year after year and changed, new stories added, other things taken out, I can't figure out which set the story was in. I haven't found it yet. And it was about a young boy who was mad at his family, so he refused. His mother wanted him to do something. I don't know what it was, bring in wood or something. He said, I don't want to do any more work. I'm tired of it. So he went outside, and he skipped dinner, And he went outside in a huff, and he was really mad. And so towards evening, he started to come back towards the house and look in the windows, and they saw his little sister coloring, and he saw his mother making a pie, and he saw his father sitting by the fire reading a book or something, and it made him realize how much he had caused so much disturbance, because they were happy and they were all at peace, and they were enjoying each other. And I don't remember quite how the story ended, but I think he came back, and his mother said, I'm so glad that you came to your senses, and welcome home, son, or something like that. But anyway, to ask the one who's making the fuss, what am I doing right this minute? Did I say something very bad to you just today? And make them just live for today. Now that is pretty much all I have for you today. I'll just run over my notes one more time and see. Oh, letters. I mentioned letters. What to write in a letter for your descendants, or for friends, or for young people. Some of the sweetest letters have the nicest sounds when they are written about what everyone is doing. And it starts out with, I am sitting here, the autumn leaves are blowing around. I'm just thinking what a wonderful day to sit down and write to you. My dad is outside doing this, and my brother is doing this, and mother's doing this. And sometimes those are the best little newsy letters. If you don't have anything to write about, that's what you can write about, what everyone is doing. And I also got that idea from one of the earlier McGuffey readers for children. Before they were public school readers, they were books that people used at home for teaching their children at home. And when school was basically based at home in the beginning, and one of the things that they had engraving type illustrations, just sketches, and it showed this cozy home with a father sitting in front of the fire, and their mother sitting there knitting or sewing some buttons on, and the children playing with something by the hearth. And then the description was, father is looking, father is reading, mother is doing this, and all that. And I read that to my children when they were little, and they were just fascinated, because it was something you could go around and find out what people were doing. And so many times we keep our kids so busy doing things, they're not really observing life. They're not really caring about that. And I think it's really important, very, very important. You might not know until you try it. So ladies, I hope that you are going to have a happy new year, and that you are celebrating life all the time. When you've been a homemaker and a homeschool mother, every day is a celebration. We just love it. Every day is special. And so I think that you're going to find that more and more as you focus more on the home and on your own self-improvement and on your own building of character. And I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I'm going to try to be here more often. It's like, who was it? Was it Margaret who said, you always say that and you never do it? Was it in Sense and Sensibility? And that's the way I am. I always say it and I never do it. But until I see you next time, I hope you have a blessed day and that you'll stay close to Christ. Bye.